I think we'll just talk just a minute or so and see if there's anybody else coming in. There's a lot of people here, and we thank you for sharing your hot summer day with us. Mary Nell and I are in Greenville, and so yeah, there's just people everywhere. Oh, good. All right. You know, our session's about maximizing the impact of classroom libraries. You know, all of us have books in our classroom. So I guess in some ways you could say everyone has a classroom library. But you're going to see today what two of my very favorite teachers in the whole world from T.A. Duggar did, and they've impacted their whole school. I mean, if anybody's maximized the impact of a school library, these two teachers have. And I just felt so privileged to get to work with them this summer. And you'll hear more about them in just a few minutes. And actually, one of our participants, Lori, who went back to the classroom this year, she actually helped him get a great start. And I just get to claim that I knew him, kind of, sort of. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But like I said, there's lots of classroom libraries, and there's lots of teachers that have books in their room. But, you know, a classroom library should not be an afterthought. It's too important, and there's even data and research that say this. An effective classroom library can be and is life-changing to students. So let me see if I can go ahead and share my screen with you so we can get started. All right, there's a very bad picture of me and a wonderful picture of Mary Nell. Can you all see that? And to know us is to love us.
It's not going to do it. Okay, just keep going. I'm sorry. I have you turn on the closed captioning.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Whoops. Took it off of the full thing there. There we go. We'll go back. Yeah, all right. Yeah, there it is. There we go. All right. I think now we're good to go. Mary Nell, you feel free to jump in here. I'm not sure of exact number of participants, but you know, there's just a little bit of Zoom etiquette that we need to just mention. If you have any trouble, we've got lots of tech support here with us. Just let us know. When you are just listening to the presentation, we'd appreciate it if you'd mute your mic. It just helps a little bit. I would like to see faces as much as possible. However, I know from all my Zoom conferences, I've had grandchildren giving me ears and everything else. So we're totally comfortable if life happens while you're on the screen. So, Mary Nell, do you have anything else to say about that? Okay. Mary Nell, you take this screen.
Sure.
Okay, we would like for you to think about a favorite book that really made an impact on you in middle school. If you can think back that far, I know it's been a time. If you will think back to that time of a book that really you loved, that stayed with you until an adult. We're having an echo here. Hold on just a minute. And if you will think of a title, and you can just drop it in the chat box so that we can see what some of those titles are. While you're doing that, I want to hold up a couple of mine. I will start by saying I'm a voracious reader, and I have been my whole life. As an adult, I easily read 2 to 3 books a week. And I think my favorite genres now go all the way back to things that influenced me in middle school. One of my favorite books is right here, Summer of My German Soldier. I read this probably when I was in, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade. And I remember sitting on a couch and just weeping over how sad this book was at the end. And I attribute this also to my love for literature about the Holocaust and World War II, which I still have to this day. Another one that I didn't have a copy of was The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. I read that about the same time. And then I was able to even, I actually saw Corrie ten Boom speak. And it really, really impacted me. Another book that was a huge influence on me was Little House in the Big Woods. And once I read it, I read the whole series. I watched the television show and just loved it. And so, these were both books that I didn't have to read. No teacher made me read, but I got them, actually started them through the public library or through a classroom library. And what we're going to talk about today is about those books that weren't necessarily the assigned books, but books that will turn kids on to reading and make them happy. I'm going to look over in the chat for some of the titles. Y'all have got some great titles. Oh, The Outsiders, which also one of my very favorite movies of all time. Education of Little Tree, Speak, Hatchet, Where the Red Fern Grows, Jacob Have I Loved, Excellent, Anne of Green Gables, The Giver. So many great titles. And, some of those are books that still are used a lot as required reading with different teachers in their curriculum. But also we want to give students a big, wide variety of books that they can read. And that's where classroom libraries come in. So what we have is today first Catherine's going to give us a little bit of an overview of what we need to know about classroom libraries. And then we have two guests that are going to show us in video form some things they've done with a great classroom library at T.A. Duggar Middle School. So I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
John, I need some volume. All right. Okay. And I was busy watching the technology piece of this, but my favorite book was Catcher in the Rye. And I'll never forget that teacher. She really couldn't have it in her classroom because it was so controversial at that time. But she handed it to me and said, I think you're ready to read this. And that meant so much to me. So anyway, there's lots of research about this topic. And I will tell you that you will have, as teachers, you will have access to these PowerPoints. And also, we took the PowerPoint slides from the two teachers because it's a little bit hard to read their PowerPoint in their video. So you'll have access to all this so that when you go back to school, you have some information to share with your administrators and PTAs, parent groups, whatever it takes to get your classroom library where it needs to be. But there's actual research that says that students in the classroom that are well stocked with good and interesting and relevant books read 50% more than students who didn't have that same access. And we know that classroom libraries generate interest. Students can explore and look at things that maybe they've never thought about before. In this, the focus of personalized learning, a classroom library can be so important because it motivates students to start learning on their own, to start looking and reading about things that interest them. Of course, it supports curriculum and differentiation. And I think the ultimate goal of people who love to read and teachers and librarians is to encourage lifelong learning through recreational reading. Now, I'm going to more or less skip over these slides because actually our speakers cover a lot about these topics, about how they chose books. The only thing I want to say here is a good place to start. If you really want to know what is happening in the world of middle school reading, go to your Caldecott, Newberry, ALA, the National Councils of Teachers of English, all of them have lists and lists of books. Also, the state of Tennessee has state Tennessee books, and it's a wonderful place to start when you're ready, when you want to start looking at what you want in your library. Our teachers will talk about the physical environment. What I really loved about these two is the fact that they were in an older building. Some of them, when I was an administrator in Johnson City, and I saw lots of classroom libraries, and it was easy because those rooms were built to develop things like this. These two teachers you're going to hear from today are in T.A. Duggar and Elizabethan, and that's a very old school, and they have taken what they have and made a classroom library, really probably what was at one time a coat closet. They'll also talk about collection content. Again, you all will have access to this information, this research that I did. I guess the important slide here is, 10 books per student is an ideal number, but you may not get there at first, but that is a good argument. And of course, if any of you all are in Niswonger schools where you're going to have a coach, they can also be part of your school plan, and we can talk about that later. And I think it's a huge importance to say that the books need to be relevant to the students. Ideally, grade level above and a grade level below. But Kristen and Brandy will talk about this. Organization, you're going to see how they organized, and it was really just quite brilliant. And sometimes the best organization is the easiest and the simplest. And then also, probably one of the most important things that they'll talk about, and something you should think about in your own classroom, is how do you keep the students interested in reading, and how can your classroom library actually impact that? I saw in another school one of the best ways, and because it became kind of cool, was to have older students come in and talk about books they were reading to younger students. And I think Brandy and Kristen will talk about some interesting things that they saw happen in their middle school in Elizabethan about this. It's always good to take one thing and show it in another subject, like getting students to create graphs and show, and there's so many different kinds of reading logs. Sometimes reading logs can be kind of boring and overused. There's some really neat ways to do that. And of course, with technology, kids can build video libraries. There's all kinds of really great ways to share what students are reading. Then we cannot ignore what we've just been through for the last 3 months in our world. And I know that when I'm talking with lots of librarians, I'm a former librarian before I became an administrator, is that we have to now think in terms of how are we going to do with electronic books. The kids couldn't read. They couldn't go back into the schools and get books, and the stores were closed. I honestly think that the door is wide open for us to think in terms of our classroom libraries about the importance of electronic. If you're lucky enough to have, or fortunate enough to have, Amplify in your school, it's a vast, vast library. And I hope you as a teacher or administrator will take just a few minutes it takes to show parents and students how to download into their devices so that they don't have to be on the internet to have access to books. So this is, I guess it's a little morbid that I put the coronavirus image there, but we've learned a lot in the last 3 months. And does anybody have any questions up to this point? Feel free to, we're watching the chat. If there's something you've got a question on, there will certainly be time at the end, or you can do it now. So Mary Nell, I'm going to turn this over to you. And you introduce our speakers, and we'll turn it over to them.
Today we have 2 teachers from T.A. Duggar with us. First we have Kristen Waite, who is a social studies teacher at T.A. Duggar. and Brandy McLeod is an ELA teacher at TA Duggar. And they also served as lead teachers within the Niswonger grant. So they have made the choice that for the past 2 years that they were in the Niswonger grant, they have used all of their grant money to establish this classroom library that is not just in one classroom, but it's available to all of their students. And so I'm going to turn the screen over now to Kristen and Brandy, and they're going to show you the way that they came about with the idea. A lot of the things we've already seen on the slides, they're going to lead you through it, what they did. And they have come up with a great classroom library. And they've even were featured in our videos for the grant because their library was so successful. So Kristen, we will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm a social studies teacher. Brandy is my counterpart. She teaches language arts. So in just a moment, I'm going to share a video with you. Is everything okay? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to share a video with you so that you have the chance to see Brandy and I together in the same physical location, which we aren't today, and get to see inside our building. A couple of apologies. We are very, very passionate about our little Niswonger book project. So I hope that the information is relevant to you. Also, our building is 76 years old, our school building, like Catherine was saying. So there's some ambient noise, which I apologize for. And even though there was only 4 people in the building at the time that we recorded it, the principals interrupt us with an announcement at one point because, you know, teaching, that always happens. So I apologize about that, but I'll go ahead and share my screen and start that video for you. And we'll be watching the chat and we'll come on and answer questions afterwards if you have any questions. Catherine, I need you to unshare your screen. Yeah.
Hello. So I'm Brandy McLeod. I'm Kristen Waite. And we are the lead teachers from TA Duggar Junior High School in Elizabethton. And we're going to talk today about how we came up with our idea for how we spend our grant money. And we chose to build a classroom library that really is more like a school-wide library. But for purposes of maybe this is something you just want to do for your own classroom, we're going to just talk about building a library for your room. So we're going to try to help you through all of the phases that we went through as we came up with this idea and just sort of go through those stages to maybe help you. So the first thing is planning, and we spent a lot of time coming up with possible titles that we could include in our library. For our purposes, we wanted to provide students with a pared down selection of popular books because we felt like a lot of them went to the media center or their local library and felt overwhelmed by the amount of titles there to choose from. And so we wanted to just give them a pared down version of that with the most popular titles for their genre that they like to read. So first thing we did is we emailed all of the ELA teachers in the building from 6th to 8th grade and asked them, are there any books that you have been reading that you would suggest that you might think that your students would like? Are you hearing any of your students talk about a certain book that we could add to the list? We also let students request books as they find ones that they like. We spoke with our school librarian to see if she knew of any books that the kids were checking out a lot or asking about. I know Kristen went to the public library, the local one. The librarians there will be happy to tell you which books are getting checked out the most. They really have more of a pulse on the immediate popularity of books. Also local bookstores here in the Tri-Cities. We went to Mr. K's. They have popular book sections already on display that we got some ideas from. We scoured social media posts. We also Google searched young adult novels, popular young adult novels. And then there are ELA groups on Facebook that I'm part of. One is secondary ELA teachers. And on there, I just put out a post and said, hey, what are your kids reading? And that's really worldwide. I got a lot of things from teachers all across the country, which was kind of cool because it expanded me outside of our little community. So obviously we had a very, very long list after doing all of that, and so we had to sort of reduce that down to find the books that would fit in our community best. As you know, things that work in inner city Chicago probably aren't going to work here in Elizabethton. So we use sites like Common Sense Media. A lot of parents and students write reviews on there, and you can get sort of a gist of what the book's about if you haven't read it. You can ask around. A lot of the teachers here have read the books. We had friends that have read them. The librarian obviously is an avid reader, so they helped on some of them. This was probably the biggest thing. Kristen and I spent a lot of time reading books ourselves. We went and found copies of some of the books and read them ourselves, especially the ones that we were sort of on the edge about, that we felt was an important book for our students to be able to have access to, but we also felt that maybe we would have to justify and know everything that's in it to have that conversation with administration. So we just read them ourselves. This is really important to do before you spend money on these books. There were a couple of titles that we did order that we ended up having to sell to Mr. K's and get something else because they weren't approved by the administration. So make sure you have that conversation before you do this sort of bulk order of books. We wanted a variety of genres and lexile levels, so we also had to sort of choose based off of that, so we didn't have all fantasy books or whatever. So once you find that list of books that you feel really good about, we spent a lot of time trying to find the best deals. We knew we had a certain amount of money, and even though that was a lot of money for us to spend on books, we knew that the better deals that we found, the more books we would be able to get. The best deal that we found was thrift books online. Great deals on books. Some of the books were between $3 and $5 a piece. Some of them are used, and they're varying conditions. And it'll say on there you can get perfect condition all the way down to very good or good condition. So you can sort of make that determination yourself. They also give you the option of hardback or paperback, but they usually have multiple copies of the same book. They may just come from different sources, as we found out once we got them. Some of them were old library books, so we had to cover up barcodes, stuff like that. They do not charge sales tax in most states, including Tennessee, so that was nice. They do charge shipping, but they bulk ship, so I don't remember the shipping being a huge issue. You earn points towards future free books. We ended up getting about 70 free books a few months later, which was really cool. They do not accept purchase orders though. So this was the sticky part on this website. This made it a little bit difficult. We were able to pay for it ourselves and then wait for reimbursement through our P-Tax, so that might be something to think about because NISWAN will only reimburse that, so they won't pay it up front. But this is the best deal if you can work around that. Barnes & Noble, we have gotten books from them also. They offer educator discounts. I think they have a deal with NISWAN as well. The books are brand new and usually hardcover, so that's nice. We got a bunch through Amazon Prime as well. You get free shipping, so that's a good part. As we've been adding books throughout since we bought that bulk order, we've gotten a lot of flea markets, yard sales, and don't ever underestimate the power of begging, especially if there's an ELA teacher in your building getting ready to retire. Usually they do not want to take all that stuff with them, so they will be happy to pass those books along to you.
Okay, so my task, I'm a social studies teacher, so a lot of the sorting books and picking books and finding different lexile levels is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So my contribution was taking these piles and piles of books and organizing them. I will warn you, if you order from thrift books, maybe warn your principal, your custodian, your front office secretary, because it was, especially for that first bulk order, they come in padded envelopes of 1 or 2 books at a time. So it was shopping carts full of books over the course of a couple weeks. So your books have been delivered. Now what are you going to do? In that first initial order, we ordered about 10 copies of each book. So it was just a process of unpacking them and sorting them, which is stuff that you all, that's not really complicated. We chose to do several copies of each book so that kids could be reading the same book, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on the unintended consequences of doing that. So we decided to sort them into bins rather than have like a traditional bookshelf, so we could group them and kids could see, especially with used books. They might have different covers. Some might have a newer, trendier looking cover. Some might look old, or an old used library copy that just has a fabric cover. But they're all the same book, and we labeled the front of those bins with the cover of the book and the title of the book, so that they could see those and kind of get sucked in by a cover. We know that that has a powerful effect. So we went through and labeled each book. Like Brandy talked about, there are sometimes old barcode labels if it's a used library copy, or different sorts of labels. So we wanted to be able to spot our books, especially because we have this library, we have teachers with their own classroom libraries, and we have our school library. So on the sides of each of the books, we would put TAD, our school's initials, and then the number of the copy of the book. That was a consistent place that we could go to for kids to look at and for us to look at to be able to identify our books. So this is a 2-year grant. Year 1 of the grant, we created a Google form where students would type in their name, first and last name, their language arts teacher, was like a multiple choice question, and then we had a drop down menu of all of the book titles for them to pick. And then we would go back through occasionally every couple weeks or so and see which ones had been checked out by a student, checked back in by that student with the same number and copy, and delete that to kind of clear out that Google sheet that was created. That seemed really great, and if you are a 6th grade teacher and you're checking out to only 50 or 60 kids, that might be the simplest method. It was the simplest to set up, but it was probably the hardest to maintain. So I think especially because our grant-funded library is checking out to over 600 students across the whole school, it became a whole lot to maintain. But it was pretty easy for the students to do and figure out. It probably required the least of them, but it was a lot of work on us to maintain it. Whoop. Okay, that's not... How did I do that? So, going into year 2, we started using a site called BookSource, and we'll show you a video of a little bit of how that works. It's free, and it gave us our lives back. It requires a little bit more of your students, but it requires a lot less of you, and there's a lot of perks that kind of go along with that that might be helpful to you or helpful to your school librarian, even as an extension of your classroom library. So it allows students to check in and out books. It tracks what students are reading, what books are getting checked out, what types of books are getting checked out. You can change the settings, so you can require students to give a star rating to books to help you kind of sort through what books, especially in a classroom library, maybe nobody's checking out, or the people who are checking them out are liking them, and maybe let's sell those and buy copies of maybe more popular books. So it does a lot of that calculating and data for you, and you can also require them to write reviews. A lot of students will write like okay, and you can choose to sift those out, but it allows students to see what other students are saying about the book that they're about to check out. And I think that that's a helpful process when you know it comes from somebody in your own building or with your own teacher. That helps. So we bought a scan gun. It works on a USB. We'll show you that too. It was about $20 on Amazon, and it works just using the barcode that comes on the book, their ISBN number barcode, so you don't have to make labels, and some of the kids really love because it makes a little boop boop sound, and especially for middle schoolers, I think especially like 6th graders, like they really love the novelty of feeling like they were legit and got to do it. In our school library, they never get to touch the computer in the checkout gun, so I think they like that. We got a used computer from our administration, so our library has a desktop where this kind of stays set up each day. And then we went through a process last summer. We bought labels, and we'll show you some of that. So they're sorted by genre, which is different than our school library because we know that that's a lot of how kids go from one book to the next. I read this book, it was historical fiction, I liked it, I'm gonna look for another historical fiction, and that can be a little daunting to sift through in a traditional library. So we sorted them by genre, we sorted them by color, we sorted them by Lexile levels, we may have over-sorted them, which I think is the type of problem I'm okay with. It did take some time, but I think it helps make the library more approachable. So especially as you're thinking about how can I make my classroom library meet a different need than my school library, what does your school librarian do really well, and where do you see maybe students not plugging into that system, and how can you mold your library to meet that? For us, it was genre, to help get them to go from one book they liked to another book that they liked. This is a storage room within Brandy's classroom, so you can get creative and find some space within your building. So you can see these are old cabinets with the doors off, but you can see our labels. So we have orange, which is our sports section. So each of the books in our, let me just pull one here. Each of the books in our sports section, you can see our numbered tab here, has an orange sticker that helps with resorting, and shows us that it's our book. You can see some of our T80 numbered on the side of the book there. We also chose to keep the covers on the bins, so you can see, students can see what the book looks like. We know that that's effective. So we have sports, realistic fiction, graphic novels, and then it just keeps looping around. Realistic fiction, Harry Potter, fantasy, and then it just keeps looping on around. Okay, so this is our portal within Classroom, or within BookSource Classroom. So I'm going to show you, you can see you have a choice, teacher side or student side. I'm going to show you the teacher side really quick. Hopefully I remember the password after all this time. Nope.
Teacher one.
Don't hack our site. So some of the things that it helps you, you can set overdue periods. You can see we have lots of books that are overdue right now. And it analyzes your library for you. So it gives you things you've done well, books that might help you, and issues. So if you don't have enough nonfiction or you need more diversity, then you can see that here. So you can also see reviews. You can set it so that you have to approve student reviews before they go. That helps you sift out some of those kids that just say, like, it was okay. You can just deny those. Within the library tab, you can see all of your books. It also imports a lot of the Lexile levels for you, a lot of the genres, fiction, nonfiction, within those. and then you can set up your students. We had a couple of workarounds in getting our students added using the different fields that they give you. So if you have problems with that within your classroom library, it's not as big a deal, but you can see it's meant for a more elementary setting with first names. So we kind of had to work around since we have 600 students in here, but you can see Ben, Adams, within that. So this is where your students will see. This is where we kind of leave it pulled up. They can either scroll to find their name or they can search. Okay, so we've got this student. We set up ours to have a password because we had so many students in and out of it. If you were just using it for your classroom library, you can kind of decide whether you want a password for it or not. We used their birth date, so 0428, whatever the month of their birth, so they can choose whether they're checking out a book to read for the first time or they're returning a book. So let's say we're checking out a book. Okay, they can scroll through here. That might be helpful in a classroom library for them to see what books are gone. This is where you can also see reviews and ratings of books, and they can click checkout, or they can click on the search bar, and this is where you use the scanner. So here's our scanner. It just plugs into the USB port. You use just the ISBN barcode from your book. It scans it into the search bar. When you click go, it finds it on the screen. You can click checkout. It has choose a copy. They'll auto do numbers, like randomize them, or we just changed ours. So you can see this is book number 8 on our label. So I'm going to choose book number 8. Check out. I'm done. And then it takes you back to the home screen. And then to check it back in, it would work much the same way. They would scan it and click check back in. Let's see if we can check it back in for you. Return a book. It shows them what books they have checked out. You can also allow them to check out only one book, which is what ours is set at. Check out more. Then they can just click return. And this is showing where they have to click write a review and select a star rating and then submit their return. And they can either check out another book or say I'm done.
All right, so if you want to offer a diverse library in middle school, obviously you're going to come up with some questions about mature content, even in young adult novels. There is such a big maturity gap between 6th graders and 8th graders that we were finding that books that our 8th graders wanted to read probably weren't appropriate for some of our 6th graders to read, and so we struggled with coming up with a way to deal with this. There are some books that we felt strongly that should be included in our library that had obviously questionable language and content, even though they were still young adult. So we had to make a decision on how we wanted to signify this and let parents know that their students may be reading mature content books. Our first year, we sent home a letter through our English department that we had parents sign. It let them know about the library, that there were some books that had mature teen content. And they had to sign and send it back saying, yes, I allow my student to check out these mature content books. Those were kept in a separate cabinet, the books were, and we thought we'd be able to police that pretty well. It became kind of overwhelming. The ELA teachers were supposed to keep up with the book or the letters that were signed. Most of them did come back signed. It was not very effective though because it was a lot to keep up with. We did also have right off the bat some parent complaints that hit the school system because they felt we were offering inappropriate books, thinking more of like 50 Shades of Grey mature content instead of young adult novel content. And so that created sort of a headache we didn't anticipate, having to justify some of our book choices. So sometimes trying to do the right thing can cause more trouble than it's worth. We wanted to make sure parents were aware, probably of things their kids were going to read anyways out of our actual media center library. So our second year, we decided to change that up. We put these pink labels on our mature content books. Our other books have yellow labels. And we simply sent home a letter through the ELA department explaining the library, the grant that we got, the purpose of the library, and that there were some books that had pink labels on them that had more mature teen content. We kindly let parents know that this was their responsibility. If they didn't want their child reading one of those books, they need to have that conversation with their child. Maybe ask their kids what they're reading, maybe look into the books themselves before they let their kids read it. So we took that burden off of us and placed it on parents. This was much better for us. We had 0 issues last year with that mature content sticker and the conversation we had with parents at the beginning of the year. Another big thing to think about is faculty support. The grant is supposed to be something that improves the culture of your school, not your ELA department. This was something that was really important to Kristen and I because we are in 2 different departments. We didn't think that literacy is something that should only be part of the English department. It should be part of the entire school. So year 1, we had 20 minutes a day of reading in each class. We had 55-minute classes then across the board. And so 1 time a week, each class would rotate the schedule between math, science, social studies, ELA, and our exploratory. So Fridays were ELA's day to have 20 minutes of independent reading out of their 55 minutes. This worked really well the way that our schedule was built. We had a lot of faculty buy-in. We had math teachers talking to kids about books and reading for those 20 minutes that their students were reading. And so it was kind of a cool dynamic that we built. And we had a lot of positive feedback from faculty about that. Year 2, our schedule changed. All right, so even during a pandemic, we have announcements interrupting us from administration. So year 2, our schedule changed to block, and our science and social studies classes lost time, and our ELA department picked up time with 2 blocks. And so we just sort of reabsorbed that reading time into the ELA department because we couldn't really justify taking more educational time from those 2 subjects. So now we have the 20 minutes of independent reading built directly into our ELA block. But students still carry their books to all of their classes throughout the day, and we have, in my opinion, found that teachers, when students finish whatever work they're working on, they give them that time to free read. And that was something we struggled with before because kids never had a book. Before we started this grant, even to their ELA class, you'd ask them where the reading book is and they'd look at you like you have 2 heads. So that is something that has changed, that now students carry that book with them all day, or their teacher can say, where is your literacy library book? Go get it so you can read. So that has been a big change. And this is sort of one thing that we showed to our faculty in the beginning and also to our administrator to sort of justify spending all of this cash on books when a lot of other school systems were getting technology and other things. We really stuck to our guns and felt that books was the best way to go, and we kind of sold it talking about this, the impact of reading 20 minutes per day on their actual performance at the end of the year. So there is a huge difference between a student that only reads 1 minute per day and a student that reads 20 minutes per day. Just in their vocabulary acquisition alone is impressive. So why books and not the other ideas that we came up with? I wish that I could show you a bunch of data, but we have not gotten any testing data as of yet to look at. So in the following years, hopefully we'll have more verifiable data to share. But we have made a lot of observations around our school. The culture around reading in our school has changed tremendously. As I said before, students never had books with them. If you've never been on T.A. Duggar's campus, it is sort of broken up, and our media center is another building outside. We we try to build in time for students to get out to the media center, but it's not the most convenient. And having a library here in the building has made a big change. Faculty and administration think more intentionally about the importance of reading for their own subject, which has been nice because, as I said before, they're giving them that free read time when they have other things already done. Teachers of all subjects in our building, we have a great faculty. They've given us book suggestions that, hey, I don't like to read, I like math, but this is a book that I enjoyed. Maybe a kid like me would like this book as well. And so that's helped us reach a lot of different kids. And they began to have conversations with their teachers about what books they're reading and vice versa. Students have wanted to read. They've been able to find books they want to read, and even some of them have admitted to me begrudgingly that they enjoyed reading that book. And I've had students say this is the first time I've ever read a whole book on my own. So that was really cool. Some ways that I encourage students to free read as an ELA teacher. This kind of was across the board in our school. We decided we're going to give them complete freedom, let them choose a book that they want to read. It might be, as an ELA teacher, that my heart's going, ugh, Big Nate is probably not a book that I would choose for them to read, but if that's what they want to read, it's okay. Reading is reading. Disney and graphic novels are okay. We are expanding our graphic novel section. They are the most popular books that we have. Yeah, a kid could read one in a day, but they're reading, and that's really the important part. Rereading the same book is okay. This was one that kind of would irk me sometimes. I'd be like, you already read that book, but I had to let go of that. Rereading it is okay. Sometimes you pick up things that you didn't pick up the first time, and again, reading is reading. This isn't something I have used yet, but I've been thinking of using this idea of making book bucks. You can create these little fake money, like Monopoly money. And one of the teachers I saw put her own face on them, which was kind of funny. The kids can earn them by finishing a book. They can you can buy books from students after they have read them. So I think about like kids that go to Scholastic Book Fair and buy 3 or 4 books and they finish them. What are they going to do? Sit in their locker the rest of the year? You can offer to buy those books with your book bucks. Add those to your library when they're done reading them. And students can also spend them picking new titles for the library. You can let your students talk about books. I would conference with my students as much as possible during independent reading time, just to ask them about their book, what's happening in their book, do they like that book, what book have they just finished. You can also let them have informal conversations, 4 or 5 minutes, to get with a couple other people and talk about what they're reading. This is what we like to do with books. As adults, we like to talk to other people about a book we just finished. So giving them that opportunity to do that helps. This is also one that I haven't tried yet, but I think would be really cool, is help them earn a field trip to go to the elementary schools to read to the younger kids. That might be a really good way to motivate them and something fun for them to do. I do first chapter Fridays, where I pull books out of the literacy library on Fridays and just read the first chapter with them. It sort of encourages them to maybe try a book that they would never think about trying. And then we also started books in the bathroom. I don't know if you can see this, but we make these little short synopses. This is just the very first part of the book, the first couple of paragraphs, and then the cover of the book. And I laminate that, and we hang them on the stalls in the bathroom. It gives them something to read while in their bathroom, and maybe they won't be carving hateful stuff into the bathroom stall wall. We're a little afraid that they might vandalize those, but honestly, I think we've had 1 or 2 things happen over the course of the year, and I make new ones and try to switch them out a little bit to give them something new to look at next time they go in the bathroom. And then the most important thing probably is just create a classroom that encourages reading. There's a template you can get online that's like a little book cover, and you can give that to students when they're done with something early or whatever, or when they finish a book, and they can decorate it about the book that they just read, and you can hang those on the walls. There's lots of different things you can do in your room. Some people like to use flexible seating for their students to have a comfortable place to go and read. I have one comfy chair in the back that students could earn the right to go and sit in during independent reading time to read back there. So there's different ideas that you can use to sort of make your room more comfortable.
We wanted to end our conversation with you today to talk about some of our unintended consequences. When we sat down to plan our Nice Longer project 2 years ago, we didn't know certainly what the world would look like today or next school year, but we didn't even know what it would look like at the end of last school year. So I wanted to tell you about some things we kind of stumbled into unintentionally with our little book project that could. We picked 10 books because we wanted lots of kids to be able to check out the most popular titles. And what we stumbled into was that books became a trend, that friend groups would rotate through different books because all of a sudden it was okay. It was cool to be reading a book that your friend was reading because you were all reading it together. I noticed I'm also our yearbook advisor. And some of my students that were in my yearbook class, we would have our 20 minutes of reading time, and I would be reading through some of the like on the fringe, wanted to make sure that we knew what was in the book titles. And these little girls in my yearbook class would pick up that book and be reading about child soldiers, and they would get into it, and they would be like, "Miss, wait, this book is intense." But they picked it up because they saw that I was reading it. And so I think there's lots of unintentional consequences to making even a small change in your classroom. That as a social studies teacher, to think that a kid would pick up a book because they wanted to know what I was reading. I wouldn't have started this thinking that that was possible or likely, but you just never know. So I think as you think about how to change your classroom library or make a small schedule change at your school or in your classroom, I think try something, because you might stumble into something that helps that one kid that you have in mind that you think, I can't ever get them to actually turn a book right side up and turn the pages, much less read it. But you might just come across an unintended consequence too. So thank you for your time, and have a good day.
And I guess we're going to take questions.
Okay, so that was our little video. I know Brandy's been kind of watching the chat window, and I hope that you're not hearing my children stomp on the floor up above me, sorry. But if you have any questions, you can type those in the chat window. I know somebody asked about the scanner. Our actual scanner model is out of stock. I think they have an updated model right now. But I found another one that seemed to have, somebody asked that exact question, would it work on the ISBN barcode label? And it got a positive answer on that. So I would still do a little bit of research, but it was about the same model. So it wasn't anything super specific to books. I love the first chapter Friday. I'm also going to post, if you're curious about that website that we use for organizing the bookstores, I'm going to post the link to that. If you wanted to try to set up your own account or something like that, or just to try it out, I'll post the link to that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'll turn it back over to Catherine and Mary. Oh, I just saw one come in. Did ELA get 20 minutes added to their class time, or you had to use the 20 minutes of the 55? So last year, every subject was on a 55-minute schedule. So like for social studies, for instance, Tuesday was our reading day, and we gave up 20 minutes of our 55. This year, language arts and got a double period, so their classes are twice as long as like a science social studies class, and so that's why they took that back, because they have a little extra padding, because we are still trying to, I think a lot of schools are still trying to figure out their scheduling matrix.
Thank you so much, Kristen and Brandy, for sharing. Now we're going to go to Catherine's screen for our evaluation and your certification. I think we'll all agree that one of the reasons their library has been so successful is they really took the time to think it through and look at the way to organize it. And the great end result is what we all want, is to create lifelong readers. And if you successfully come up with that, then your library will be a success.
Before we go to the evaluation piece, would you take just a minute and in your chat, you know, teachers, we're all about sharing, and either tell something that you saw that you really thought that you would like to try this year, or something you're doing in your own classroom library or have seen done that you think that all of us would like. And again, Kristen and Brandy will hang around for a few minutes if you have any questions. I enjoyed my year with them so very, very much. And it was a great, with the high school background that I had, they taught me as much as anything about, you know, working with middle school students. But please take a minute, let's take about 2 minutes and put in chat something that you've either want to try or something that you've done. So let's do that right now. 1 or 2 minutes.
It's going to blast off their screen real quick. So we'll have to wait till after they get done. I'll post it. This go right up the screen. They'll never see it.
You see anything in the chat?
Yeah, there's stuff flying by.
Yeah, there's people saying stuff.
I'm glad we're saving it because I want to read that. All right, 1 more minute. We're getting close. And did you say the chat would be also in the materials?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, there's some wonderful things in the chat, and I thought my screen was muted, but it wasn't. So as you heard me say, you can see the chat in the materials. It's been saved just like this presentation has. And in addition, you'll be able to see their slides that were on the screen in addition to mine, that some of them I didn't go into a lot of detail, but it's all yours, and use it. Now, Mary Nell's going to wind us up with how you can get your certificate. Brandy, Kristen, thank you again so much. And all of you all for giving us an hour of your day. We appreciate it. And we hope that you'll look at the NICEWonker site and look at some of the other wonderful opportunities you have this week and the next two. There's wonderful things happening. Thank you. Mary Nell?
We appreciate you participating in our virtual Summer Institute session today. And now we'd like you to take this 1-minute survey. You'll go over to the chat. It's the next to the last link. It says from John Payne to everyone. And we would really appreciate it if you would do that right now, because the way our evaluations work, it has to be done right after the session. It will take you about a minute. You also can note on this form if you need credit for attendance, and you will receive an email certificate. So we thank you very much for participating. Please do the evaluation and hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.